Hello everyone. This video is going to be about two books which I have recently read. Both of them are written by Joan Didion. One is called The Year of Magical Thinking, published in 2005, and the other one is called Blue Nights, and I have a physical copy of the second one. This one was published in 2011. I should acknowledge Margaret, a fellow YouTuber who helped me find Didion, who introduced in a couple of her videos, she introduced Didion and her work. Something that both of these books have in common is that they are about grief and loss and the experience of being disoriented because of the loss of a very significant and close person to Didion, the author, and then trying to reorient and find her place again in the world in the absence of those significant people. The first book, The Year of Magical Thinking, is about the sudden loss of her husband, John Gregory Dunn, and the second book, Blue Nights, is about the unfortunate loss of her daughter, Quintana. So because the subject matter of these two books is so heavy and about such difficult experiences, we might begin by asking, maybe an obvious to some viewers, some readers, it might be an obvious question and valid question to ask, why read these books? Why read books that are about such difficult, heavy subjects? Why not read a book that is funny about, a light-hearted story of, thriller or romance or detective novel? And I think we can give good answers to that question. For me, the most important answer to that question, why read these books, is that these books are about certain truths that are revealed, that Didion reveals through her exploration of grief and her experience of loss and the experience of realizing the absence of her loved ones. She becomes aware of certain facts about life that were always the case, even before the loss, even before she was hit by these traumatic experiences. So there were certain truths about life, truth of mortality, the truth of aging, the truth of the fragility of life, the impermanence of life, certain biases and prejudices. For example, she becomes very sensitive about how people have a kind of a bias, a prejudice against bereavement, or the people we usually want to stay away from, people who are going through a very difficult experience like this, or we want to avoid certain topics like death. She becomes aware of these things, and these truths about the human condition are, in general, they are worth reading about. And it's not like she has gone through a phase of her life for the first time, and now because she's in that phase, she can report what it is like to lose a loved one. It's not like a graduation party or a wedding. Now that we've had a wedding, let's write about it. This is more like a revelation of something which is true even before the event, before the critical event. Another reason to read her work is because I found her style of writing to be extremely beautiful and attentive to detail and attentive to emotions. And she treats her own mind and her own experience as a very mysterious domain. She asks a lot of questions, and a lot of things are not resolved for her about her own thoughts, about her own emotions, about her own memories. So, beautiful style, good writing style, especially if you're interested in developing as a writer. It is very important to read good books if you want to also write. So before reading a couple of passages from her books, I want to talk about one of my own experiences because I think it is relevant. And I was thinking about this while I was reading the book, the first book especially, The Year of Magical Thinking. When I was a kid, when I was 9 years old, we had a neighbor, and our neighbors were a family. One of the families living in our neighborhood were a family of parents, a husband, wife, and two kids, two boys. The father of the family used to go back and forth between two cities, working in a city and then flying back and forth and spending the weekends with his family. During one of these trips, this father of the family died in a plane crash. So it was a very sudden loss. It was a very traumatic experience for the family. And I remember going as one of the families. We all went to visit them, the wife and the sons, to show our sympathy, to be there for them, and to see how they were doing. And I remember the elder son was about 12, 13 years old, but the younger son was, I think, around 4 years old, 4 or 5 years old. And I remember I was really struck by realizing that the younger son had not grasped the fact of the loss of his father, because he was running around very cheerful, as if everything was normal. Nothing unusual had happened. And I realized, wow, someday he is going to truly understand what has happened, and then he's going to be sad. Because everybody else could understand. Everybody else had grasped that fact. But the younger son had not yet grasped. He could talk about it. Actually, he said that something has happened, that his father was gone. But he didn't really understand what that means. Within each person, there is a point of view that is very similar to that child who didn't understand that his father was gone. That even when somebody told her, his response would be to deny it, to say, oh, not really. And Didion's reactions, many occasions throughout the writing, demonstrates that kind of response, that kind of attitude, that kind of point of view, the point of view that denies the reality of loss, the point of view that sees everything the way it was before. For example, when she returns from the hospital right after the husband's death, she returns from the hospital, she arrives back home, and she sees the husband's jacket hanging beside the door. And her response to these kinds of objects, these kind of ordinary objects that were associated with her husband, would pull her back into the memories, and the memories would come back, and the memories would urge her to deny the current facts. She actually called this the vortex effect, the effect of being pulled back into old memories and reliving the old memories. I've picked two passages from The Year of Magical Thinking, and I want to read these with you. The first one is about what the book is trying to do. Quote, "This is my attempt to make sense of the period that followed, weeks and then months that cut loose any fixed idea I had ever had about death, about illness, about probability and luck, about good fortune and bad, about marriage and children and memory, about grief, about the ways in which people do and do not deal with the fact that life ends, about the shallowness of sanity, about life itself." I love that phrase, the shallowness of sanity. The idea that what we experience as a sane state of living is actually very fragile, and it's very easy to lose. All it takes is an extraordinary or unusual, unexpected event to push us out of that shallowness. The second passage is about what it means to have this experience, to be the kind of person who is going through loss. Quote, "People who have recently lost someone have a certain look, recognizable maybe only to those who have seen that look on their own faces. I've noticed it on my face, and I notice it now on others. The look is one of extreme vulnerability, nakedness, openness. It is a look of someone who walks from the ophthalmologist's office into the bright daylight with dilated eyes, or of someone who wears glasses and is suddenly made to take them off. These people who have lost someone look naked because they think themselves invisible. I myself felt invisible for a period of time, incorporeal. I seemed to have crossed one of those legendary rivers that divide the living from the dead, entered a place in which I could be seen only by those who were themselves recently bereaved." The last thing I want to mention is one of the devices that she used, actually two of the devices that she uses in both of these books heavily, and they actually construct the character of the book, the writing. One is that she relies a lot on attention to detail. The other one is repetition. She repeats a lot. She repeats certain phrases a lot. And it seems like these repetitions are serving the function of placing a phrase or a thought in different contexts to derive new meaning out of these phrases. But here is a quote from Walter Benjamin. Benjamin says, quote, "In all mourning, there is a deepest inclination to speechlessness. So people who are mourning have the deep inclination to be speechless, to not say anything, which is infinitely more than the inability or disinclination to communicate. So this speechlessness, the deep inclination to be speechless, is not the same. It's infinitely more than not being able to communicate or being disinclined to communicate. And I think, especially in Blue Nights, when a lot of phrases are being repeated, these repetitions could be about being unable to move past a thought, being unable to stand up and keep going. Just like how there's a scene that she describes several times. The scene is she's in a theater and she's sitting on a folded metal chair, and she's overcome by the fear of maybe she won't be able to stand up. She will not be okay enough to be able to stand up. And not only she remembers that fear and she carries that fear with her, but she also keeps remembering the memory of that fear also is carried with her. This might be related to this idea of speechlessness. And because of being speechless, certain memories are retained, certain ideas are repeated because the next thing, the next idea, the next word, the next sentence is not coming. So she gets stuck with what is already said. So in addition to the exploratory side of repetition, it might also suggest the inability to move past a thought, to be unable to get unstuck from what is already said to move to the next thing. All right, I would recommend these two books. They are, I think, interesting would not be the appropriate description, but they are worthwhile. And if you do read them, please let me know what you think. If you have read other works about grief, loss, also I would like to hear about them. Thank you for your attention, and I will speak with you in the next video. This is Bambi, our cat. Hopefully he will be quiet during the video, but we will see.